Hey guys, I've had a lot of you wanting me to do a video showing you how you can run tracks inside MainStage. So that's what I'm going to do today. There's two different ways you can do it. Depending on your application, you may choose one over the other, but I'll show you both so you can decide which one you want to use, or both if you want, obviously. Okay, so what I've done here is I've set up a template. I've imported all my MIDI tracks from the Hillsong's No Other Name, I Believe album, and I've paired them up with all the sounds that I've used. These are all from Pete's Patch's 2014 packs. So the first one I want to show you is how to create backing tracks for MainStage that give you flexibility with structure. So what I've done is I've also imported this, I believe, from iTunes. So that's the audio track that you get when you buy the No Other Name album from iTunes. So the reason why I imported that was it was easier for me to figure out all the different sections, having the vocals in there opposed to just instrumental stuff. So I imported that. Then I went to Global Tracks and I marked each individual section where it starts, all the way through bridges, choruses, all the way to tags. So once I did that, I started bouncing every single section from the beginning of the section, so intro all the way to the very end, then from the beginning of the verse all the way to the end, chorus all the way to the end, etc., etc. The reason why I did it from each section all the way to the end and not just that section was because if the structure continued the same way that the album structure did, I wouldn't need to re-trigger it for each individual section. So it just means there's less triggering live. Like, for instance, if you just go from verse 1 and skip verse 2 and go to the second chorus, for instance, trying to do a shorter version, you don't have to keep triggering it for each individual section. You just trigger it once to skip to a further section along and then just leave it. So that's why I did that, bouncing it from the beginning of each section all the way to the end. Okay, so another thing to note is when you're bouncing each section, you need to make sure that if you're working in MIDI, that the MIDI notes are quantized to start exactly on that section. So what I did is I bounced intro all the way to the end. Then whenever I would go to the next section, I would just check to make sure the MIDI was lined up exactly with beat 1 of that section. Otherwise, you'll obviously miss that note or that chord or whatever it is for that section. So that was another thing that you need to make sure you're doing. I forgot to mention the reason why I'm working in MIDI and not just in audio for doing these tracks is it just gives you a little bit more flexibility. You can change the keys, you can change the tempo really easily without getting artifacts which happen if you're working in the audio environment. It also means that you don't get section bleed from, let's say, the verse going into the chorus. You don't get reverbs hanging on, you don't get notes traveling into the next section because you're bouncing it from that section, and in a wave format obviously you're getting the bleed from the other section leading into the next section. So that's another benefit for doing it with MIDI rather than audio. Okay, so once you've bounced every section, like I said, you also need to bounce just a small section, even if it's just a bar of silent audio. So what I did was I just muted all of these and bounced it from bar 1 to bar 2 just to get a silent waveform. The reason why I did that is, well, actually I'll explain it when I import it into MainStage. It'll make more sense inside there. Cool. So once all that's done, we'll go to MainStage. Select the software instrument that you want to play along when you're triggering these tracks. For this song, it's the soft piano or felt piano by Spitfire Audio. That's actually just a $1 or $2 piano from Spitfire Audio's laboratories. It's an actual piano that we used on the album. You simply go to spitfireaudio.com, I think it is, search for Spitfire Laboratories, and by donating $1 or $2, I think it is, to UNICEF, you can download that for free. We also used it with a lot of shimmer reverb, Valhalla's shimmer reverb I think it was, but I'm using a Lexicon version for this. But anyway, back to the tracks. Find the sound that you want to use with the multi-tracks, or with the tracks that you've created. Add another instrument in. Software. Just going to turn these off. Now I'm going to import it into the EXS24 sampler. Okay, once that's opened up, go to Edit, Zone, Load Multiple Samples. Okay, now you need to find where you bounce those files to. And select all those files. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention is when you're bouncing each section, it's really handy to number them 1 through to whatever number, obviously. The reason why numbering it is important is because it helps you keep them in order, helps you remember which section is after the other section. It also means when you're importing them multiple samples at a time, it puts them in numerical order, and so you don't have to try to manipulate the samples once they're imported to put them in order. So I've just simply labeled them 1 through to 12, and you can see 12 is my stop or my silent wave. So that's what I bounced last. Okay, go to Add, Done. Now this is the note that you want the samples to start from. So because I want it right down the bottom of my keyboard to make room for me to play along with the tracks as well, I'm going to make that C0. Okay, once that's done, that's all you need to do. Leave on one shot, leave it as is. One shot just means when you play the note, you can release the note and it'll continue to play even though you've released the note. And you don't want to have to hold that note continually throughout the song, so just leave that on. Okay, you can close it, and when you close it, it's going to ask you to save the file. Save it as whatever you want. I'm just naming it Believe 1 because I've already saved Believe once before. Replace it. Great. Now there's a couple of things you need to do inside the sampler. The first thing is to move the velocity sensitivity all the way up. So this just means that no matter how hard you hit the note to trigger the sample, it's going to stay at exactly the same volume, because you don't want part or a section of the song being quieter because you hit the note quieter for that section. So just move that all the way up to the top. The next thing you want to do is you can either make it mono or just change the voices to 0. Sorry, not to 0, to 1. So whichever one, obviously it does the same thing, mono or polyphonic with one voice. And that's pretty much it. Okay, so now if I play the C0 note, it'll start from the intro. And I can skip to whatever section I want just by selecting the correct key switch. So I can play any section I want, and then by pushing B, it'll silence and stop the track. And that's basically it. As you can probably tell, I can play along with it if I wanted to with my felt piano. There's one thing I forgot to mention. A good thing to do is also edit the layers. So what I would do here is I would change the piano layer to stop. There, I've already done it actually, but I want the samples to only be triggered by the bottom half of the keyboard. So setting it up like that just means that when you trigger a sample, you're not going to hear the piano, and yeah, it just eases up the resource, so when you're playing the piano, it's not trying to trigger notes that aren't loaded into the sample as well. Great, so that's the first way of doing it. Let's go back to Logic and show you a second way of doing it. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do with this one is just bounce everything from a couple of bars back this time. So I'm not starting from beat 1 of the song, I'm going to give it a couple of beats previous just as an intro, and that allows me time to create a cues track. So what we do when we're running tracks live at Hillsong is we run them with cues, click, and stereo left and right. Sometimes we even split the tracks up to bottom end heavy stuff like basses and bass synths, and then high stuff just so the front of house engineer can mix in the bottom and the top stuff just to kind of customize how he mixes it. But for this example I'm just going to do left and right tracks, mono cues, and a mono click. So basically all you do, bounce out everything for left and right tracks, then solo. I've just created 2 cues, I didn't go all the way through, but basically if you're doing it you would create cues for the whole song, basically just like this. Believe, 2, 3, 4. So that kind of vibe throughout the whole thing. So bounce the track left and right, in solo bounce the cues, and then mute everything, turn on your click, and bounce it from the beginning all the way to the end, and that's how I create my click track. Okay, so once I've done all that, I'll go back to MainStage, select the sound that you want to play it with, and this is really easy. You just find those samples, tracks, click, cue, and literally just drag it onto the instrument that you want to add it to. Now this just takes a little while for it to import. Actually, because I've done it before, it was really quick. Okay, so now you've got 3 separate tracks all imported into playback, and one will be the left and right tracks, one will be the cue, one will be the click. Actually that even labels it for you, which is really handy, so you can put them in whatever order you want to put them in. Okay, so if you're running a interface with multiple outs, you would probably want to change your click to a different out, and your cue to different outs than what you're running your tracks on. Obviously you don't want front of house to have the click and cue track mixed in with the wave file with the track music. So what you'll do is you'll just select that and route out different outs. Because I'm just running through my computer, I haven't got a multi in and out interface connected there. Okay, so the next thing you need to do, open up playback, make sure it's at the correct tempo, sync, it should sync it to the correct tempo, and it's 142, so I actually need to go into here. It's actually 142.036 or something, but yeah, this will do for now. Okay, what you need to do here is always make sure it plays from start. It's just a safety guard. You don't want to have to bring all the tracks back to 0 every time you want to run the track. So that's just a safety thing. So every time you push play, you know that it's going to start from the beginning of the song. Then you want to go over here and assign all of them to the same group. That means that when you push play in one of them, it'll sync all of them together and play all tracks. Okay, let's do that. Again, set this up the same way. Okay, basically you're ready to go. The last thing you might want to do is just create a button so you can start the samples without having to click your mouse on the actual play button. So I've added that inside the layout section. Then you go to map, literally just go map, and now you can trigger all the tracks via MIDI control or button. Lastly, you might want to set the levels to customize how loud you want them. For this example, I'm just going to move them all down a little bit. And now you've pretty much got your customized track, and you can also play along with the track. So I'll just hit the play button. Oops, I accidentally mapped it to something else, so let's go map. There we go. Now that's what I forgot to do. Click map parameter again. Now here we go. Believe 2, 3, 4. Verse